So it's a pretty disgusting and unsettling reality that Democrats in America's largest city would cheer for a communist who masquerades as a socialist. But mamdani isn't an idiot, though. He knows communism isn't viable. He, like many others in America who try to sell it to the masses, knows it's a flop and a death sentence, but he sells it anyway, likely because he hates America. But those who have lived under communism know this song and dance, and they're sending out a clear warning to Americans: do not turn this country into what they fled. Well, Lilly Tang Williams escaped communist China, and after living through Mao's Cultural Revolution, she came to the United States in search of liberty. And now she's warning Americans and all who will listen not to take it for granted. And Lilly Tong Williams joins me now. Lilly, it's great to see you. I love your patriotism on full display, and I'm so happy to see it.
Well, thank you for having me. You look lovely today.
Thank you so much. So I know a little bit of your background. I know that you destroyed David Hogg, and I'm going to play that clip in a little bit. But first, I want you to tell my audience what you lived through, because we hear about communism and we hear about China and we hear about Vietnam and we hear about all these places, but I don't think Americans have a true understanding of what it's actually like to live under a regime like that. Can you kind of break it down for them?
Well, as I said on Fox Business, when you interview me with another lady, that people who never suffered the consequences of socialism, communism, are tend to buy into this utopian society, and but in fact, it will never come. That's what Mao did. He sold the free stuff and the people's commune, take what you need, and have you land. But it just once they took over, though, people could not vote, and they live on food rationing, and there's always shortage of supplies. It's one brand for everything, the government brand. There's no more free market and private property ownership, and the government owns the means of production. So as a result of that, he caused a mass famine. My father had to survive that on one bread a day. And in the city, imagine the countryside, estimated 40 million to 60 million peasants who supported the Mao's communism were starving to death. And I wish that the young people would know their history. And thanks to our failed American public education system and the Marxists in even private universities, they just don't know their history and they support the socialists. All sounds wonderful, free stuff, but you always pay with your future enslavement, hunger, poverty, and basically potentially even just running out of food and everything.
Yeah. Because when you're dependent on the government for everything that you need or that you want, you are in such a vulnerable position. And these young people at these universities, they don't understand it because they think, well, everyone's just equal. Well, everyone's equally suffering. They don't know that part of it. When you hear politicians like Bernie Sanders or mamdani or others talk about how the billionaires are the problem, that's the problem. The corporations and the billionaires, those are the people responsible for oppression and unaffordability. What do you say in response to that?
Those people who demonize capitalists, rich people, and the profits because they truly don't understand how free market capitalism works. We are not perfect. We have free market capitalism, but also corporatism, where government subsidize big corporations. And so that's a different topic. But this same rhetoric I heard in China. Always, they want you to hate the rich people. It's between the haves and have not. Traditional classical Marxist class struggle, they want to put envy into your head, and they have to sell you the hatred, envy, and the equity, which is equal outcome to get you to buy their evil ideology. But the thing is, I always tell young people, you buy every product, services that private company offer to you voluntarily. It's a win-win situation. If you don't like iPhone, you don't have to buy it. You don't like Amazon, you don't have to buy it. But when government took over, you have no choice. You have no option to buy other private companies' products anymore. You must live under government mandate. You must buy one brand of shampoo, one brand of toilet paper. There are lots of things that we take for granted in this country, which is a relatively more free market, free enterprise society. But the people who never live under that kind of mandatory control and the government took over economy, they just don't know how horrible that is. And so the hatred toward private companies, it's a traditional Marxist class struggle. It's between the oppressor versus oppressed. It's cultural Marxism, identity politics, not even get into cultural Marxism, which is CRT, DEI, and even ESG, and also all the transgenderism pushed down to our kids, and because of trans rights. To me, it's all the same thing that I have heard, I have saw before, and lived under in People's Republic of China.
Yeah, it's breaking down the family unit and people's identity because then they're more easily manipulated and controlled. For my audience that maybe doesn't understand this concept, if you live in communist China and you work really, 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 really hard outside of the Communist Party, outside of the government, can you ever attain wealth? Like, what does that look like in communist China? If you don't have the blessing of the government, but you're on your own and you really strive to be great, is that possible?
Well, not under Mao, it was impossible. I mean, I was born kind of individualistic and competitive. But the thing is, I feel like no matter how hard I worked and how smart I was, I could not really become very successful because I was bragging about myself as a 7 years old elementary school student to say, I'm the best student. I made 100% on all my subjects. I will be the first one to join Mao's Young Pioneer, which is a grassroots Mao's organization for elementary school students. Guess what? Because I was too confident. I was bragging about my individual achievements. My girlfriend, classmate report to me, to the teachers, and I went to teacher's office. I went to the principal's office. They told me, because you were bragging about yourself, not, be like everybody else, keep your head down. We are not going to let you to join the Mao's Young Pioneer as the first group of students. I was put off for 1 year because I trust my girlfriend and bragging about my individual accomplishment. Oh boy, I learned a hard lesson so bad. I will never forget that lesson. After that, I basically keep my head down, don't brag about myself, don't show individual confidence and meritocracy, just be like everybody else. That's a typical collective society. You don't want to stand out as an individual. If you are too successful and too confident, that's a flaw. That's what the collective society for you. You need to be just like one of the masses, one of the collective society, like a robot. Basically, everybody is a robot and subject to one party control. Otherwise, they're going to hammer you down. They're going to stop you from moving on to be very successful. That's why, when Mao died, China's economy was about to collapse in 1976. And I was 12 years old. And then that things changed. China had to do economic reform under Deng Xiaoping. So that way people could have more supplies, more food to eat. Then later they deregulated at the center level and boosted China's economy by saying, okay, it doesn't matter if you're a black cat, white cat, if you can go out make money and you can catch mouse and you are a good cat. So that's how China become bigger economy because of the different ideological shift. But too bad now, later when Xi Jinping came into power, he started to take China backwards. That's why China's economy today is really bad.
Yeah. So another thing that you've warned about, and you did it so wonderfully with little David Hogg, but you warned also about gun control and what that means. I want to play this clip for those who haven't seen you in action. It's a great one. Let's take a look back.
Hi, my name is Lilly Tang Williams, and welcome to my live free or die state. Actually, I am a Chinese immigrant who survived communism. And under Mao, 40 million people were starving to death after he sold communism to them, and 20 million people died, murdered during his Cultural Revolution. So my question to you, David, is that can you guarantee me, a gun owner tonight, our government in the US, in DC, will never become a tyrannical government? Can you guarantee that to me?
There's no way I can ever guarantee that any government will not be tyrannical.
Well, then the debate on gun control is over, because I will never give up my guns. Never. And you should go to China to see how gun control works for dictatorship of CCP.
Yeah, you're way too smart for him, Lilly. And the fact that, by the way, that somebody who considers himself to be a leader of the Democrat Party that was in a leadership role at the DNC couldn't guarantee that America wouldn't become tyrannical, that's unsettling. But the part about gun control, I know you're never going to give up your guns, but how does that work into the whole communist ideology when it comes to guns and self-defense and personal protection?
Well, lots of young people don't realize that. Once the socialists and communists, like-minded people take over power, they always wanted to disarm you completely, because just like Mao said, a political power comes out of a barrel of gun. The party must control all the guns, because they don't want the people to have that option to defend themselves, their lives, their families, their property. And you cannot find the tyranny, I always tell people, with chopsticks, with kitchen knives, that's what I was told. If criminals come to rob us, we go kitchen to grab our choppers, like big Chinese choppers for cooking, like a very sharp, very heavy. But that's all we got. That's why when I come to this country, actually, I'm wearing a patriotic dress today, because tomorrow, we're going to go to a family reunion, celebrate July 4th soon. And I want to tell people that the Declaration of Independence, Founding Fathers document, and the Constitution brought me to this country. When I was in college, third year in Shanghai, I met a college student, exchange student from America. He told me about those two documents. So I said, this is an awesome country. I will have a natural right guaranteed by the founding documents, will never be taken away. And my rights come from God, my creator, not from any government. That's what I'm trying to defend by running for Congress in this country.
Well, I can't think of anyone better. The last question I have for you, when you hear politicians or celebrities or even people on social media talk about how awful and oppressive and racist and xenophobic and sexist America is, what do you tell those people who think this country is so awful?
Well, I suggest to them, I even offered, round trip ticket, go to third world countries, go to countries like China, go to Cuba, North Korea even, just live there for a year. I guarantee you when they come back to the United States, if they are ever, able to leave and come back, they will kiss the dirt. That's how I feel about this country. And when I talk about it, I get emotional. This is the best country on earth. And there's no place to go. People should understand. Other countries, people want desperate to come here, live under freedom, because they could not have that in other countries. So I hope that they will learn history and do research on their own. Don't buy into the propaganda, the media control, the politicians' rhetorics, because to have that independent mind, to have a free speech, have a free press, that is the core of American ideals. It's without the Second Amendment right, we cannot defend our First Amendment right, which is a free speech and free press and freedom of religion. So those Bill of Rights, we should hold dearly to our heart. But if you go talk to the college students, talk to the high school students, they really are poorly educated. They don't understand what freedom is. They want to rely on government. So the government is solution for all their needs. That's wrong, because if government can make you depend on them, That means overnight, they also can take everything away from you. So we need to rely on ourselves. It's not like what leftist says. If you dare challenge those narratives, reject like DEI, you reject illegal immigration, then you are racist bigots. No, that's their tactic. That's a typical communist tactic. Divide and conquer. Identity politics. Otherwise, if you don't fight each other, then Americans win. So they want us to fight each other. So that's my warning to people. We need to be respectful to each other. We need to disagree nicely, but we need to focus on common ground because we have so much in common as American citizens. We want our country to be successful. We want our children to live their American dream. That's what I'm fighting for, to keep American dream alive.
Well, you provide so much knowledge and insight, and I think that your message is so important. Best of luck to you on your congressional run. I can't think of anyone better, and thank you so much for taking the time with me. God bless you, God bless America, and we're so happy to have you in our great country.
God bless America. Thank you, Tomi.
Thank you, Lilly. All right, folks. Daniel Di Martino also escaped an oppressive nightmare, but in Venezuela. He immigrated to the United States as a teenager and has since become a powerful voice warning against the failed policies of the left. With firsthand experience of what socialism really does to a country, he advocates for free markets, secure borders, strong American values. He's also a PhD economist, Manhattan Institute fellow, and founder of the Dissident Project, which sends speakers like him into schools to expose the truth about socialism. And Daniel joins me now. Daniel, I think that your story is so inspiring, and I think that your message is so important, and I know that you make it a point to tell people what living under socialism and communism and all of these ideas that are antithetical to the American dream and our values. I think it's so important what you're doing. But before we get into all that, I want to go into your background, because I read your history there, but I want people to really get a sense of what you've been through, what you've lived through, and why you're so passionate about making sure America doesn't turn into Venezuela.
Understood. Absolutely. We'll do that. And also, thank you for having me. I actually have been following you for many years, way before you joined at Fox. So I'm so happy that you're here. So happy we could connect and to share my story.
Well, thank you for being here. Tell me what it's like. What's it like growing up in Venezuela? And what do people not understand about it?
What people don't understand is that Venezuela was such a wealthy, prosperous, and beautiful country. And unlike any other socialist country, we really had it all. Like, Venezuela has great weather. Caracas, where I am, where I'm from, was in like 70s year round. We had the beach closed. All my family lived there. My family had immigrated to Venezuela, all my grandparents specifically in the 1950s from Spain and Italy. And I say that because I think a lot of people don't quite have in their mind that there were other countries that were a refuge for people seeking prosperity and freedom like America has been. And Venezuela was that for millions upon millions of people. And, we had 2 cars. I went to a school that my uncle worked at, a private school. And so I went tuition free because my uncle worked there. And I had amazing teachers, amazing friends. Honestly, I would have never moved out of Venezuela for absolutely no reason other than that the socialist regime came to power. My family had a gas station. We made good money. I never really lacked anything when I was a kid. And then things changed. And with change, I mean, suddenly we didn't have water in our house. Suddenly we didn't have electricity. Then we had to line up for things. Then they would deny me things in the grocery stores, or pharmacy or any store. And then there was the political persecution. You were afraid of saying what you thought. There were mass protests and hyperinflation. We can go into the details, but I want people to picture that I had regular lives like what most Americans did.
Yeah, well, Venezuela, you know better than I, but from the research that I've done, Venezuela was the place to be up until it turned socialist. And you know what? Cuba, same story. So it's wild that people can't recognize that, even people that aren't history buffs. The fact that they just can't, on their face, recognize that there's a common denominator here is wild to me. But when socialism comes to power, I doubt that they sold socialism like, hey, we're going to have bread lines and we're going to ration your food and you're not going to own anything and everything's going to be common and the government's going to control what you think and what you do and what you have. They don't sell socialism that way. They sell it like mamdani does. They say everything's going to be cheaper. Everything's going to be more affordable. It's going to be the working class people in charge. Is that how they sold socialism in Venezuela?
It was definitely a message of class warfare. So it was a message of the rich people are ripping you off and exploiting you. So we're going to take away all their wealth. We're going to use the oil wealth, right? We're such a wealthy country. We're such a rich country. Nobody should be in poverty in such a rich country. Just like they say here, this is such a rich country, right? Nobody should lack childcare for free or, all the things for free that they promise. And the problem, of course, is in the details of all those ideas. What they meant with the workers being in power is that they took over the factories. We had literally the military of Venezuela take over factories of Coca-Cola, of glass factories, of farms, everything you can imagine. And obviously, they didn't run them like the owners. They ran them to the ground. Every single thing that they took over was bankrupted. You could see, the products that they sold were essentially, they just took over their copyrighted intellectual property, and then they stamped a red seal in the shape of a heart that said, "Made in Socialism." Imagine how ironic it was. And obviously, all those products ended up disappearing from the shelves eventually because they stopped producing. And they stopped producing because of a really simple reason. There's no profit incentive. The government had the incentive of remaining in power like any politician in a democracy. And how did they remain in power? By hiring more government workers for the factories, for the ministries, for every agency, not requiring them to show up to work, and selling things at a lower price than their cost. And the result is that the companies went bankrupt, right? Then they printed more money. And so we had inflation, and then the poor became poorer. And because we had inflation, they blamed it on greed of the businessmen, right? Just like when we had inflation here a few years ago under the Biden administration, Biden was blaming it on the oil companies, when in reality, it was the government, right? Not the oil companies that suddenly became greedier. And the result was, over time, the rhetoric went from positive, we want the workers to be in power and to help the poor, to we want to punish the rich and you should be happy with what you have. There's a really famous line in a speech where Chavez, a few months before he died, he said, "It doesn't matter if we don't have electricity. It doesn't matter if we don't have food. What matters is the revolution." They did not care.
Wow. It's so startling. I want to play a clip because there are some, when we're talking about mamdani specifically, he calls himself a Democrat socialist. Now, I call him a communist. President Trump calls him a communist. A lot of people don't know the difference. But the Democrat Party now has gone from saying, we're not socialists, we're not communists, to saying, well, we are socialists, but we're not necessarily communists, and passing that off like it's an accolade. Let's take a listen.
He says that he's a democratic socialist. He's a socialist, I'll be kind. But calling him a communist is not far off base when he talks about seizing the means of production. That is a communist party plank. He is talking about doing that. So I don't have any problem with calling him what he is.
And I don't have any problem calling Donald Trump a felon or charged with rape, or the fact that he doesn't pay his vendors, or the fact that he's racist because he illegally
and he was.
So I don't have any problem. And you're right. And
as
you know
all
what?
of
You
those
may
things.
have a Democratic socialist elected as mayor of New York City.
No, you agree with Pete that he is a communist then?
He's not a
He's
communist.
a socialist.
He said seize the means of production.
He's a socialist.
He is not a communist.
I'm not a
He's
socialist, but he
literally
calls himself.
he's using the language of the Bolsheviks, is he not?
He's
He's not. He's
All
a
right.
socialist, not a communist. Those are
Seizing the
different.
means of production?
That's called socialism, not communism.
Use that
You're putting-
the USSR and Stone
Those are
Dormer
different
debaters.
things,
That's where you
though.
hear
I mean,
that
like,
stuff.
you
So, Daniel, these people that make their money sitting on CNN, I think the only reason CNN still exists is because of Scott Jennings, who keeps that whole network afloat. But I love the way that they are saying, well, socialism is that's actually okay. Socialism, communism, maybe we're not there yet, but socialism is now a mainstream idea. What do you tell these people who are too dumb to be on any network but sit on CNN next to the great Scott Jennings?
That the socialists are going to eat them inside their party. And the fact that the Democratic establishment is tolerating somebody who is so far to the left, probably much farther to the left than even AOC ever was, or even Bernie Sanders ever admitted to wanting to seize all the means of production, I think it's going to be bad for them. They're going to regret it, because if mamdani wins, New York City can't become a socialist hellhole because the mayor doesn't have all the power to do, what Chavez did in Venezuela. But that's just the first step. Then another Democratic socialist will win perhaps the governorship of New York, then perhaps California. Perhaps one of them will run for president. There'll be a recession and the Republican will lose and the socialists will win. And eventually they will try to turn America into a socialist nation. That is their end goal. Their end goal is, like he says, globalize the intifada. And if the democratic means don't work, they will use violent means. That's how democratic socialism came about. It came about not because they had a different goal, but because they thought that in the meantime, we should use democratic means to achieve the socialist goal of seizing the means of production.
How do socialists and also communists, how do they use things like race and identity and, you mentioned already the social class, we know that, but how do they weaponize other aspects of what Democrats in this country are already weaponizing? Xenophobia, misogyny, sexism, racism, CRT, DEI. How do they use that to advance socialism?
In Venezuela, it was very difficult. They tried. Chavez had for the first time an anti-racial discrimination law that we never had, because the history of race in Venezuela is very different from the United States. We were always a mixed society. And if anything, the immigration that we had since the 50s was European migration, and then some Christians from the Middle East, Syria and Lebanon especially. And if anything, they were the ones discriminated, people like my grandparents, not the other way around. So really, the history is very different. Chavez tried. In the law he passed, he forced businesses to put signs saying that racial discrimination is prohibited. It wasn't ridiculous. Nobody really cared. He did try to bring up a lot of indigenous rights issues. Changing the name of national parks, tearing down statues, our main national park in Caracas is a beautiful mountain that overlooks the city that everybody has called for centuries Avila. And he changed it to some indigenous name that nobody that's the legal name now, but nobody really uses it. It's kind of like when Biden tried to change the name of Mount McKinley, I think, but everybody still calls it Mount McKinley. So they're obsessed with this because socialists and communists throughout history have always wanted to rewrite history. This is something that Orwell warned about in 1984, right? That they had a ministry of truth. They would rewrite the entire history, because history always helps you learn to not commit these kinds of mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And you don't want people to know how good it used to be either, because then they might look back and say, wow, it used to be pretty great here and now it's not. I wonder what changed. And then you look at the people in power and that's your answer. Last question I have for you, and this is still kind of on the topic, but we were seeing under Joe Biden mass immigration and protected status for Venezuelans coming to America. Now, listen, my husband is Cuban. His family is from Cuba. So I have a soft spot in my heart for people who are fleeing true oppression and that want to be Americans. But I think what Biden did is he opened the gates for a free-for-all, and I don't think it was people like yourself coming in from Venezuela. I think President Trump has a point when he said Venezuela is not sending its best. And maybe that was purposeful. So when you look at not only the open border under Joe Biden and all the Venezuelans that came in, but when you see Donald Trump saying we're not going to do that anymore, as someone from Venezuela, what's your unique take on it?
Well, my take is that it's certainly true that over the last 4 years or so, the Venezuelans that crossed the border illegally were very different from the Venezuelans that had come before. Still Venezuelans are, to a lot of people's surprise, the most highly educated Hispanic group in America. About 60% of Venezuelans in this country have a college degree, actually, which is the highest rate of any of these groups. But the problem is that we did have a lot of criminals come in. I think it was not really purposeful from the regime. People just don't go to prison in Venezuela. It's not like there were many people to release. That's why we had crime in Venezuela. They just were never arrested. And they just ran out of things to steal in Venezuela. The rest of Latin America is also infested with Tren de Aragua. And then they came here because there were a lot of opportunities to steal, especially in Democrat-run cities where they don't go to prison either. Now that's changing. I'm very glad that's changing. I don't think we should have just a free-for-all. But I do think that a lot of people who are good also received temporary protected status, and I wish they hadn't taken that away from those people. It's difficult because the reality is that the only solution to what's happening in Venezuela, same thing as Cuba, is the end of those regimes, right? Otherwise, people will still flee. They might not come to the US, but, now they're going to Spain and they'll go to Chile and they'll go to other countries. Perhaps that's good. Perhaps the dictatorships will run out of people to be dictators over. I don't know. But I do think that you do need to have a special consideration, like the US has historically had with Cubans, for people fleeing from socialist regimes.
Yeah. It's such a hard thing because you want the good people to come and you want them to seek refuge and contribute and assimilate and, have something to offer this country, and they do. But then you don't want the murderers and the rapists, and to your point, the people who ran out of things to murder and rape, so they came here, for the land of opportunity and not the kind of opportunity we want to give. So it's an important point that you make, though. And I think what you're doing is so great, and the message that you're sending is such a powerful one. I'm so happy that you're doing it. Thank you for taking the time to break all this down for my audience today. I hope to have you back.
For sure. Thank you so much, Tomi.
Thanks so much, Daniel. All right, folks, that does it for this episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. I hope the American trust fund babies of New York City who think mamdani is their guy after watching some stupid TikToks, well, I hope they'll wake up. No one flees to communism or socialism, only from it. So don't be stupid. Catch full episodes of this show on Outkick, Fox Nation, foxnews.com. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless. Take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.